J.K. Rowling is back in the headlines for challenging police in Scotland to arrest her. The Harry Potter author posted on social media saying she looks forward to being arrested while pointing out her major concerns over a new law that has come into effect in Scotland. The Hate Crime and Public Order Act makes it an offence to stir up hatred with threatening or abusive behaviour on the basis of characteristics including age, disability, religion, sexual orientation and transgender identity. But the legislation doesn't specifically ban hatred against women. That's something the Scottish Government claims will be addressed with a separate law against misogyny that is yet to come. Now, J.K. Rowling has labelled the new law ludicrous and has pointed out its flaws. The 58-year-old author listed several examples of what she could be sent to prison for, and that is for misgendering double rapist Isla Bryson and misgendering 6'5" convicted pedophile Katie Delatowski, who was sent to a women's prison after sexually assaulting a 10-year-old girl in a female bathroom.
So under this new law, conceivably, you could be arrested for calling trans rapist paedophiles men. That is the reality.
J.K. Rowling is among critics who fear that this law could be used to silence feminists and argues that rights for trans women shouldn't come at the expense of those who are born biologically female. The best-selling author wrote, "Scotland's Hate Crime Act comes into effect today. Women gain no additional protections, of course, but well-known trans activist Beth Douglas, darling of prominent Scottish politicians, falls within a protected category, few. And the image that has been shared is of Beth Douglas pictured with a knife and an axe, and she's previously been accused of posting violent tweets and threatening to beat up women." J.K. Rowling went on to say the new legislation is wide open to abuse by activists who wish to silence those of us speaking out about the dangers of eliminating women's and girls' single-sex spaces, the nonsense made of crime data if violent and sexual assaults committed by men are recorded as female crimes, the grotesque unfairness of allowing males to compete in female sports, the injustice of women's jobs, honours and opportunities being taken by trans-identified men, and the reality of biological sex. I'm currently out of the country, but if what I've written here qualifies as an offence under the terms of the new Act, I look forward to being arrested when I return to the birthplace of the Scottish Enlightenment. Now, the Scottish Minister for Victims and Community Safety claims that the new law would help build safer communities that live free from hatred and prejudice, but critics claim that the law will have a chilling effect on free speech. GB News host Patrick Christys has warned that this isn't just a problem for Scotland, but a problem for the rest of the UK.
The bill criminalises hurty words or biological fact. Children could report their parents for things said around the dinner table. Somebody sitting next to you at a pub could report you for what you say over a pint with your mate. And you will be investigated by the police. Police Scotland have confirmed they will investigate every single report. Humza Yousaf is promising you that you have nothing to fear.
Now, people are reacting to J.K. Rowling's comments on X, both praising and criticising her for speaking out. One user wrote, "Scotland, England and Ireland are in serious trouble." Another posted, "Thank you for your seemingly never-ending courage and humour. It is a light in dark times and has already made such a difference. I hope you don't mind, but I'm giving you the most giant hug in my head." And another person posted, "Thank you for speaking for millions of us, including this homosexual Irish man." Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden is facing criticism after he claims that this year's Easter Sunday will also officially be the Transgender Day of Visibility.
Here's how US President Joe Biden marked Easter Sunday as the International Day of Transgender Visibility. Foreign Minister Penny Wong marked it that way too. But this culture war is hiding the real issue, this vicious war that's also had women's rights activists intimidated and vilified here. In New Zealand, even physically attacked, with one woman in her 70s punched in the head in Auckland when she went to a women's rights rally. Now, what's being missed so often in this almost physical war now between activists on both sides is the welfare of the young people, even of the children who claim they were born in the wrong body and need to change gender. Activists are treating this as a tribal issue or about how intolerant you are, when we should be laser focused on this question. Well, what about the children? Who are these vulnerable teenagers being given drugs to block their puberty and later surgery to cut off their breasts, say, or their genitals? And are they actually being helped by this? Joining me is a former BBC journalist who asked that question years ago in Britain, wrote a devastating book called Time to Think, which is just now out in an updated edition and in paperback. Hannah Barnes, thanks again for coming on this show. First, tell us again how you got involved in this issue in the first place.
Well, it was back in 2018 and there was a leak to a newspaper here in the UK, which all it said really was claims had been made at this children's gender clinic based at the Tavistock Centre that the histories and the reasons behind young people's distress around their gender and wishing to transition weren't being fully explored. So that kind of sparked my interest. And then just a couple of months later, the contents of these concerns, if you like, were leaked further. So this was a report. And then it transpired that actually these were the concerns of 10 members of staff. Now, I don't know so much about the Australian health system, but here it's pretty rare to get a whistleblower in the NHS, in our National Health Service. To get 10 from one small clinic is extraordinary. And I just thought, there's something going on here. I was completely open-minded. I didn't know whether what they were saying was true or could be stood up, but that's why I started looking into it.
Now, what you found and you've written about in your book struck me as absolutely shocking, that kids were being quickly pushed on to transgender drugs and really literally life and body changing treatment when they displayed quite often, not always, but quite often, other problems that you might think, hey, maybe that's the real issue, or is there something behind it? Tell us about those.
Well, what we heard was that many of these children were unhappy. They might suffer clinically from depression or anxiety. Some might have eating disorders, but generally speaking, there was an unhappiness amongst them. Many had been bullied. Sometimes that bullying would be triggered after they had perhaps come out as gay, and then it would be homophobic bullying. And essentially, all of these children, bar 2 or 3%, and the data are really poor, but what it seemed to be was all of them weren't just having difficulties around their gender, but had other difficulties as well. And the fear was that these weren't being explored adequately before a referral for puberty blockers. And it's quite hard to convey to people just how vulnerable some of these children were. I mean, this wasn't the majority, but you had a small number who were in care. And it's a small number as part of the referrals, but massively overrepresented in terms of the population. So we had looked after children, we had children who were non-verbal, children who couldn't read or write, children who identified as another race, as well as another gender. And you had some children, again, a small number, but who had suffered the most extreme and awful abuse and or trauma. And what these staff were saying was not that you couldn't have something bad happen to you and not be trans, it wasn't ruled out, but they were saying, hang on, we need to really be careful here. These drugs are very powerful, we don't know much about them. There's so much going on in these children's lives. We really need to make sure, and they felt that wasn't happening. And in a small number of cases, children could be referred for puberty blockers after just 1 hour or 2.
Oh, that's just shocking. You also mentioned quite a number had autism, and quite a number also were from broken homes, or they'd lost the parent in one sense or another. It was just shocking. I'm almost out of time. We've got a minute to go. Britain's National Health Service now banned giving children puberty blockers, at least for the time being, although they can still get it through other forms of treatment. Here there's been almost no change like that at all, almost no discussion. It's transphobic. What needs to happen?
I don't want to be so presumptuous as to advise Australia, but essentially what's happened is we've recognised this as not a culture war issue. It's healthcare. It always has been. And what's happened here in the UK is we've looked at the evidence base. Other European countries have done that as well. And it's been judged that there isn't enough certainty that these drugs are safe or clinically effective. Now, that doesn't matter where those children live. The evidence base is the evidence base, whether they're here in England, whether they're there in Australia. And so we're returning to medicine, to evidence-based medicine, because frankly, it's not fair and it's wrong that this group of children and young people are subjected to a lower standard of care than anyone else would expect.
So
and that's what's
true.
happened.
So true. It is medicine, not politics. Children first. Hannah Barnes, thank you once again for your time. Lovely. Thank you.